My name is Avery Kincaid, 32 years old. 2 weeks after my wedding, I found out the photograph that shattered my life was never supposed to exist. That's what the photographer said when he slid the flash drive across his desk, his fingers lingering on the metal like it burned. "Ma'am," he whispered, eyes flicking toward the half-closed blinds as if the walls could report him. "I think you should see this," he swallowed. "But please don't tell your parents yet, not until you're sure." The flash drive was small, silver, and harmless looking. It sat between us on the wood like an unexploded device. "I've already seen all the pictures," I said. My voice sounded steady, professional, the voice I used in briefings and after-action reports. "The album, the online gallery, the backup link." He shook his head. "Not this one." He turned his monitor slightly toward me and clicked a file that didn't have a thumbnail, just a black frame and a timestamp I recognized. 21:43, the middle of our reception. The video started with a blur of lantern lights, guests moving in and out of frame, the slow pan of a camera catching the crowd. In the far left corner was a mirrored panel we'd used to reflect the string lights. The photographer had been shooting the bride and groom dancing. I remembered that. What I didn't remember was the reflection behind the tent. In the mirror, small but unmistakable, stood my husband, David, and my maid of honor, Claire. Her hand rested on his chest like it belonged there. His head was bent close to hers, mouth near her ear. The intimacy wasn't blatant, but it wasn't innocent either. Not in the way people who know they're being watched behave. The clip was only a few seconds long. If you didn't know where to look, you'd miss it. I didn't miss it. "Play it again," I said. He did. Again. By the third time, my hands had gone numb in my lap. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked finally. He hesitated, guilt and fear warring on his face. "Because the truth deserves to be seen," he said quietly, "even if it hurts." That sentence would replay in my head for weeks. The truth deserves to be seen. I took the flash drive, signed the receipt without reading it, and walked out of the studio. I drove home through Norfolk on automatic pilot. Rain streaked across the windshield in long gray lines, turning streetlights into smears of gold. The ring on my finger felt heavier with every mile, like a weight I hadn't earned. My uniform cap sat on the passenger seat next to me, the gold trident catching faint light from the dash. I'd worn it earlier that week for a ceremony on base, a reminder that I'd survived combat zones, covert insertions, rescue missions in places most people couldn't find on a map. No one ever trained us for this kind of ambush. I parked in front of our apartment and just listened to the wipers thudding against the windshield. My mother's voice floated up from memory. "Love can be blind, but marriage teaches you how to see." I shut off the engine and the world went quiet. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner, the comfort of ordinary life. I kicked off my shoes and changed into my old Navy SEAL training sweatshirt, the one that still smelled faintly like salt water and exhaustion no matter how many times I washed it. On the fridge, under a magnet shaped like a miniature anchor, was a wedding photo the photographer had printed as a surprise. Me and David under the oak trees, sunlight filtering through the branches. His arms around me, my head tilted back in laughter. Maybe the reflection was wrong. Maybe the light lied. But gut instinct is the first tool they sharpen in SEAL training, and mine wasn't fooled. We're taught not to confuse shadows with faces. My gut knew what it had seen. The next morning, I walked down to the pier behind our apartment. The tide was high and steel gray, the sky matching it mood for mood. I stood at the edge, rain spitting against my face, and remembered another day on this dock. David on one knee, hands shaking just enough to be endearing. The ring in a velvet box. His voice thick when he said, "You're my safe harbor, Avery." I'd believed him. Now the words felt like cruelty in retrospect. He hadn't been my safe harbor. He'd been the storm. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Mom," I answered, forcing my voice into something resembling normal. "Sweetheart, you haven't called since the wedding," she said. "How's married life?" I looked at the churning water. "Calm seas," I lied. She chuckled, that warm, familiar sound. "Well, calm never lasts long in a Navy family. You know that." "Yeah," I murmured. "I know." When we hung up, a pang of guilt twisted in my stomach. I'd lied to the one woman who'd taught me that honor matters even when nobody's watching. I promised myself I'd tell her soon, but not yet. A SEAL doesn't go loud without intel. That night, sleep stayed on the far side of the room. I lay on my back, watching the ceiling fan spin lazy circles, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge and the occasional car rolling past outside. The empty space beside me in bed felt colder than it should. David was in D.C. again, working late for his consulting job, a pattern that had started long before the wedding. I chalked it up to ambition. Now, every missed call, every phone-died text, every vague running late, replayed in sharp, ugly detail. At 02:13, I gave up on sleep. I rolled over, grabbed my laptop, and opened our email. At first, it was what I expected. Venue confirmations, to-do lists, debates over centerpieces and playlist songs, messages from Claire about the rehearsal dinner, guest lists, flowers. Then, between "did you choose linens" and "here's the updated seating chart," the tone shifted. "Miss you already. I'll cover for you if she asks. Can't wait till it's all over." I stared at the words until the letters blurred. Then I scrolled back, checking dates. 8 months before the wedding. 6 months. 4. Every message felt like a blade, carefully wrapped in polite phrasing. By dawn, I'd deleted nothing. I wanted every timestamp, every word, every digital fingerprint. The truth was going to have a paper trail. Later that morning, a delivery arrived. A small box with my mother's handwriting on it. She must have mailed it before the wedding. The postmark was old. Inside, cushioned in tissue paper, was my late father's seal trident insignia, polished until it glowed. There was a note in Mom's careful script. For courage, not revenge. I sat at the kitchen counter for a long time, staring at those 4 words. Then I took the trident and closed my fist around it until the points dug into my skin. Courage, not revenge, I whispered. I'll try, Dad. No promises. That evening, David came home earlier than expected. He kissed my cheek, set his briefcase down, and poured himself a drink. How was your day? He asked. Quiet, I said. He didn't notice the way his own hand trembled slightly as he lifted the glass. He didn't notice I was watching him the way I'd been trained to watch enemy movements, looking for tension, avoidance, tells. Big week coming up, he said. Might need to head to DC early. New project. Sounds important, I replied. My voice was smooth, almost gentle. He smiled, oblivious. It is. Could set us up for years. Later, when he fell asleep, I sat by the window in the dim light, the trident in my palm, the inscription card beside me. Moonlight traced the edges of the insignia, turning it cold and bright. I didn't know what my next move was going to be, but I knew one thing with the clarity I usually reserve for missions. Whatever he was hiding, I was going to find it. And when I did, there would be no turning back. The next morning, rain tapped against the windows, a soft, persistent rhythm. David was still asleep, one arm flung across his pillow in a posture that used to make me feel safe. Now it just felt surreal. My phone blinked with a new text from Mom. Breakfast Sunday. Dad would have wanted us to keep that tradition. Wouldn't miss it, I typed back. I dressed in jeans and a windbreaker, pulled my hair into a tight ponytail, and drove out to the place where this whole mess had started, the wedding venue. The farmhouse on the edge of Chesapeake Bay looked smaller without the decorations, its wraparound porch damp from last night's rain. Staff were stacking chairs and carrying out bins, the normal aftermath of someone else's celebration. The event manager, a polite woman in her 50s, recognized me instantly. Lieutenant Commander Kincaid, she said. Your wedding was beautiful. We still talk about it. The vows, the salute, the sunset. Everything looked perfect. Yeah, I said, almost perfect. I asked if she remembered seeing David and Claire step away from the reception that night. Her expression flickered with something, hesitation, maybe regret. I do recall them going behind the tent, she said. I thought maybe they were taking a call. It wasn't long. It was enough. I thanked her and left. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house. Mom opened the door with flour on her apron and her hair pinned back in the same neat bun she'd worn when she was a Navy nurse. Sweetheart, she said, pulling me into a hug. You look tired. Long week, I said. We ate pancakes at the kitchen table, the quiet, familiar, and heavy. Finally, she reached across and took my hand. You've got that mission look again, she said. You had it after your second tour, and you've got it now. It's nothing like that, I said automatically. Pain is pain, honey, she replied. Doesn't matter if it's shrapnel or heartbreak. I couldn't answer. Back at the apartment that night, I logged into the shared cloud drive Claire and I had used to plan the wedding. Folders everywhere. Flowers, music, seating charts, invoices. One folder caught my eye. Receipts. I opened it. Dozens of scanned bills stared back at me. Hotels, restaurants, most of them from months before the wedding. Arlington, Richmond, D.C. 2 names on the reservations, David Lawson and Claire Thomas. Attached notes. Meet you after the conference. You always make the risk worth it. She'll never find out. My vision went blurry at the edges. Betrayal is a strange wound. It doesn't kill you immediately. It just keeps tearing through you, over and over. The next morning, I ran along the Virginia Beach boardwalk until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. The wind was sharp, the sand wet under my shoes. Every step felt like a countdown. 3, 2, 1. When I got home, my neighbor, retired Sergeant Mike Daniels, waved from his porch. He was older, his spine still straight in a way that said Marine before he even opened his mouth. "You okay there, Commander?" he called. "I've had easier battles," I admitted. He nodded slowly. "Then remember this. Never go to war angry. It clouds your aim." Good advice, even if he didn't know which war I was fighting. That evening, while David was in the shower, I checked the inside pocket of his suit jacket. My fingers brushed paper. A hotel receipt, Arlington. 2 nights ago, room for 2. I took a photo of it with my phone and slid it back exactly where I found it. The shower roared on, oblivious. Later, when the apartment grew quiet, I opened my laptop at the dining table. I created a new folder on my desktop and named it simply Truth. Inside it, I saved copies of the emails, the receipts, the photographer's clip, my notes. I opened a slideshow program and began assembling images. My mom adjusting my veil, my father's folded flag, David kissing my forehead at the altar, Claire zipping up my gown. At the very end, I inserted the video, the reflection in the mirror. His hand on her back, her face lifted toward his. I muted the audio. I didn't need sound. I wanted silence to do the talking. By the time I was done, the sky outside had gone from blue to black. The apartment was lit only by the glow of my screen and the soft lamp in the corner. On the counter, my father's trident lay beside Mom's note. For courage, not revenge. I touched the pin like a benediction and whispered, "We'll see." Then I closed the laptop, smoothed the front of my shirt, and looked at my reflection in the dark window. Hair pulled back, eyes tired but focused. For the first time since I'd watched that flash drive in the photographer's studio, I didn't see a blindsided bride. I saw a strategist. "You chose the wrong seal to betray," I murmured to the empty room. I spent the next 2 days in a kind of suspended calm, the kind that comes before a storm, before a breach, before an operation that could go sideways fast. My instincts weren't screaming yet, but they were alert, prowling beneath my skin, like they used to when I was deployed. The apartment felt too quiet. My movements felt too light, too measured. I knew myself well enough to recognize the signs. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for a mission. By Saturday evening, everything was ready. The apartment was spotless. The roast simmered low and steady in the oven. The wine David liked was open and breathing. I even set the table with the fine wedding china we hadn't used since the honeymoon brunch. White plates with gold rims, the kind of fragile beauty that looks like it would shatter under the slightest pressure. Fitting. I showered, dried my hair, and put on the blue dress David said made me look soft. He meant it as a compliment, but even then it had felt like restructuring, like he was molding me into the version he preferred. Tonight, I wore it like armor disguised as silk. At 6:12 p.m., my phone lit up. "David, on my way. Big day Monday. Might head to D.C. early." "Me, drive safe." I placed my father's trident on the kitchen counter beside my laptop. Beneath it, Mom's handwritten note. For courage, not revenge. I touched the words lightly with my thumb. Then I opened the slideshow on the TV and set it to a paused frame. The ceremony, sunlight cutting through the trees behind us. Let the performance begin. David walked through the door at 7:03 p.m., smelling like sandalwood and hotel soap. Not our soap, not our scent. A small detail, but one I tucked away. He smiled wide when he saw the table. "Wow, what's all this?" "Dinner," I said mildly. "Sit." He kissed my cheek, relieved and grateful. 2 emotions guilty people often feel. Or cowards. Sometimes both. We ate beneath the warm, amber glow of the lamp. He talked about contracts, schedules, and his big project in D.C. I answered where necessary, asked a question here or there. It was almost peaceful, and that was the strangest part. But peace built on lies always cracks. After dinner, when the dishes were cleared and the roast was gone, I wiped my hands on a towel and turned to him. "I made something," I said. "A slideshow." His eyebrows rose. "For what?" "For us," I smiled lightly. "For clarity." I connected my laptop to the TV. The opening frame appeared. My bouquet on the kitchen table the morning of the wedding, dewdrops clinging to the roses. David leaned back on the couch, wine glass in hand. "Nice." The slideshow began. First frame, Mom adjusting my veil, pride and worry twisted together in her expression. Next frame, my father's folded flag from his military funeral. Next, my nephew hugging me at the rehearsal dinner. Next, our neighbor, Sergeant Daniels, shaking David's hand. Each image was a domino, clicking gently into the next, building a rhythm. David relaxed, shoulders softening. Nostalgia is a powerful sedative. Then came the image of Claire zipping up my gown. David's hand stopped halfway to his wineglass. He blinked, twice. You two were close, he said. Since boot camp, I replied calmly. She knew my passwords, my secrets, all of it. His jaw flexed. Yeah, I remember. The slideshow rolled on. Vows, salute, applause. The reception lanterns glowing like stars scattered across the lawn. Then the clip began. The mirror came into view. Claire, David, the tilt of her head, the ease of his hand on her back, the closeness of mouths meant for someone else. The moment neither of them thought was being seen. David froze completely, not even a breath. I let the clip play twice, then paused it at the exact frame where his face turned just enough to be undeniably him. The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. How long? I asked, voice steady. He stared at the screen, then at me. He swallowed. It's complicated. Complicated how? It started when you were deployed last spring, he said quietly, looking at the floor as if the truth lived there. Claire and I were planning the wedding. We were both stressed. One night turned into a couple of nights. His voice shook. I thought it would burn out. But it didn't. No. Silence expanded between us like a growing canyon. I folded my hands in my lap. Your email said you missed her, that she made the risk worth it, that she would cover for you. He flinched. You went through my messages? I went through my life, I said. His voice rose, the defensive note obvious. It didn't mean anything, Avery. You were gone. Even when you were home, you were still somewhere else. Mission mode. You weren't... A wife? I asked coolly. A partner, he finished weakly. I let that sit, let him hear the hollowness of his own excuse. If it meant nothing, I said, you wouldn't have kept receipts. Not in a folder named receipts, not in shared drives, not spanning months. He blinked. Receipts? Dozens, I said. Hotels, restaurants, Arlington, Richmond, D.C. His face drained. Avery, we can work through this. People recover from worse. We can go to counseling, or... Stop! He did. I want honesty, I said softly. Not reconciliation, not comfort, not excuses, just the truth. His eyes were wet now. Fear, not remorse. I messed up. It was temporary. Interesting choice of word, I said, rising. Given your temporary decisions have permanent consequences. He reached for my hand, an instinctive, panicked reach. I didn't move. What do you want? He whispered. I want you to pack a bag and go to a hotel tonight, I said. We'll discuss logistics later, alone. Do you still love me? He asked, voice cracking. The question surprised me, but my answer didn't. I don't know what I am loving right now. He deflated. I grabbed a duffel from the hall closet and set it on the couch. He packed without folding anything, his movements frantic and messy. At the door, he turned. Avery? I didn't answer. He left. The latch clicked behind him. Hours later, I sat alone on the couch, the slideshow paused mid-frame, my own face reflected faintly in the black TV screen. The trident lay beside me, metal cold under my fingers. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. If you need anything documented officially, I'll help. I kept a time-stamped backup. I'm sorry. E.g. I typed back, thank you, hold on to it. Then another buzz, a different number. Avery, can we talk? Claire. I set the phone down. Let it buzz until it stopped. Midnight passed. I washed the dishes slowly, methodically, the way my mother does when she's thinking deeply. Outside, a lone boat drifted through the channel, its running lights steady, cutting through the dark like resolve. By 1 a.m., I made a list, SEAL style. Not of emotions, of facts. 1. Secure evidence. 2. Control communication. 3. Protect family, especially mom. 4. Seek counsel. 5. Choose the moment of engagement. At dawn, I laced up my boots and ran the boardwalk. Old vets nodded at me. One lifted his coffee mug and called out, "Orders received, keep moving." I did. And by the time I returned home, sweat cooling on my shoulders and the ocean breeze stinging my face, I knew exactly what my next step was. Not revenge, not rage, something sharper, more focused. Truth. By Monday morning, the storm inside me had quieted into something colder, purposeful, sharp-edged, the kind of internal silence I used to feel right before a high-risk op. At sunrise, I put on my uniform, boots polished, hair pinned tight, sleeves crisp. Outwardly, I looked like the same lieutenant commander who'd walked through those base gates 1,000 times. But inside, everything had shifted. When I entered the operations wing, Captain Mason stood at the far end of the briefing room. His posture was rigid, assessing me the way commanders do when they sense a soldier carrying more weight than gear. "Carter," he said, motioning me in, "you look like you've been awake for 3 days." "Just one, sir." His eyebrow lifted. "You want to talk about it?" "No, sir," I said. "I want to work." He studied me for a long moment. Mason wasn't unkind, just precise. The kind of man who wouldn't pry unless absolutely necessary. Finally, he nodded. "Fair enough." He assigned me to a routine operations review. Supply chains, contractor metadata. Nothing flashy, nothing high risk. But fate doesn't care about assignments. Because buried inside that database, like a landmine waiting for the right footstep, was a name I knew too well. Lawson Logistics. David's company. My pulse tightened, not panicked, just narrowed, focused. I clicked deeper. More names, more connections, patterns that shouldn't link, but did. Invoices, contractor messages, routing transfers through dummy accounts. Non-classified but sensitive logistics bouncing between networks that didn't make sense. And there, threaded through the metadata like poison in a bloodstream, Claire's name. Not once, not twice, consistently. My stomach went still. Affair was one thing, but this was different. If they were careless enough to betray me, maybe they were careless enough to betray something bigger. I downloaded the relevant data onto a secure drive, encrypted it, logged the timestamp. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't stutter. I operated with the same steady clarity I used to have during nighttime recon. This wasn't just personal anymore, it was official. That evening, I drove off base to the small diner where Lieutenant Evan Price, my old intel tech from Bahrain, spent most nights nursing diner coffee and solving problems no one wanted to admit existed. Evan was older than me by a decade, bearded, always smiling like the world was a puzzle he enjoyed taking apart. He looked up when I slid into the booth across from him. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, the seal ghost herself. I set the drive down on the table. "I need your eyes." His smile faded. "What's on it?" "Patterns," I said. "Bad ones." He plugged it into his laptop, lips pursed. The screen reflected off his glasses as he scrolled, clicked, rewound, replayed. His face shifted from curiosity to concentration, to worry. He leaned back slowly. "Rachel!" "Avery," I corrected. "Kincaid." He nodded. "Avery. These aren't just supply discrepancies. These files bump into a network ONI has been tracking. Someone's been leaking logistics to private contractors overseas." "Illegal?" He hesitated. That alone told me the answer. Not classified, but close enough to get people fired, or court-martialed, or worse. A cold line of steel settled through my chest. "How deep?" I asked. "Too early to tell," he said quietly. "But you're sitting on federal-level intel, and if your husband's tied in—" "I need truth," I said, "not protection." He nodded slowly. "Then you need to take this up the chain. But once you do—" His eyes locked onto mine. "Avery, you won't control what happens next." I didn't blink. "I don't need control," I said. "I need the truth out." That ended the conversation. The next morning, I requested a private debrief with Captain Mason. He didn't speak for a long time after I finished laying out the evidence. When he finally did, his voice was low. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "If your husband is involved, this won't stay personal. You understand that?" "I do. And once we notify ONI, this becomes federal. Zero emotion, zero motive, just evidence." "I'm not bringing this as a wife, sir," I said evenly. "I'm bringing it as an officer." He held my gaze another beat, then nodded. "All right," he said. "You've earned my trust before. I'll take it to the Office of Naval Intelligence." He stood, straightened his shoulders. "But Avery," he rarely used first names, "there's no turning back once this starts." I thought of my father's trident, my mother's handwriting. Courage, not revenge. And the mirror clip of the man I'd married touching someone else on my wedding night. "I'm ready," I said. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. "Unknown. You've been digging, haven't you?" "Unknown." Seconds later. "Don't destroy everything over one mistake." I didn't need a photo to recognize the voice behind those words. "David." My jaw tightened. I typed back 2 words. "You already did." Then I powered off my phone. The next 48 hours moved fast. Oni confirmed the anomalies Evan spotted. They wanted a sting, a closure meeting, staged to look personal. I was the bait. They needed me to get David and Claire in the same room, make them talk, make them trust me again, make them confess, not the affair, but the contract leaks. The operation was set for Friday night in a rented office space that smelled like disinfectant and artificial calm. Fluorescent lights, neutral decor, cold air that tasted like nothing. Perfect for government surveillance. Agent Matthews met me at the entrance, hands clasped behind his back. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready since the day he lied to my face," I said. He nodded once. "We'll be in the next room. You won't be alone." But I was. Emotionally, mentally, this battlefield was mine. David arrived first. Perfectly pressed suit, expensive cologne, smile too rehearsed. "Avery," he said softly, "you look good." "I didn't come here to talk about appearances," I replied. He sat slowly, studying my expression, like he was trying to read a map he no longer had the coordinates for. "You're calmer than I expected," he said. "I've had practice." The door opened. Claire stepped in. She froze when she saw me. The confidence drained from her posture. Her perfume hit the air, sweet, familiar, sickening. "Rachel," she said. "You didn't think I'd find out?" I finished. Her mouth snapped shut. We sat, 3 people, 1 ruined triangle, inside a room wired with hidden microphones. "Let's be honest tonight," I said quietly. "For once." David exhaled sharply. "I already told you everything." "No," I said. "You told me half-truths. Big difference." They shifted. I pressed harder. "You used my wedding," I said. "Used my clearance, my connections, my world." Claire's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." David stiffened. "Avery," he said carefully, "you don't understand the full picture." "Then explain it." He hesitated, then cracked. Real cracks, the kinds that form under pressure. "It wasn't illegal," he said. "It was just an exchange. Information for opportunity. Everyone benefits." Claire went pale. "David, stop." "Let him," I said softly. "Truth deserves to be seen, remember?" His eyes widened. "How do you know about—" "I know everything." His shoulders slumped. "I felt alone," he muttered. "You were gone. And when you weren't gone, you were still somewhere else, in mission mode. I told myself it wasn't serious. I told myself once the wedding happened, it would end." "You gambled our vows," I said. "On momentum?" He didn't look up. "It meant nothing," he whispered. "No," I said. "If it meant nothing, you wouldn't have risked everything for it." Agent Matthews' voice murmured in my earpiece. "We've got enough. Keep him talking 30 more seconds." So I leaned forward. "Tell me, David," I said, "was any of it real or just strategy?" His jaw flexed. Then, "At first, yes. And then, I got used to pretending." That was the confession they needed. I stood, then survived this. The door burst open. 2 ONI agents entered, badges raised. "David Lawson, Claire Thomas, you are under federal investigation for unauthorized data transfer and breach of contract confidentiality." David's chair clattered backward as he stumbled to his feet. "Avery, what the hell?" "It's called accountability," I said. Claire trembled as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. "You set us up," she cried. I shook my head. "You set yourselves up. I just turned on the light." David's face twisted in disbelief. "You still love me," he said. "I know you do." I met his eyes with calm he couldn't recognize. "That," I said, "is what makes this hurt less than it should." The agents escorted them out, their footsteps echoing down the hallway. When they were gone, the silence felt cavernous. Agent Matthews re-entered. "You handled that," he said. "Better than most men I've seen in my line of work." "Training helps," I replied. He nodded. "It's rare to see someone walk away without breaking." I looked toward the door where David had disappeared. "Who said I'm walking away?" I murmured. He huffed a soft laugh. "Fair point." That night, I drove to the pier near our apartment, the same one where David once knelt with a ring and shaky hands. The wind was cold, sharp, cleansing. I pulled the wedding ring from my pocket, held it up against the moonlight. A perfect circle, a promise that never meant what it claimed. I rolled it once between my fingers. "Safe harbor," I whispered. Then I let it go. It hit the water with barely a splash, sinking fast, disappearing into the dark. Gone. My phone buzzed. "Mom." "Sweetheart, I had the strangest dream. Your father was standing by the ocean. He said, 'She did it right this time.'" My throat tightened. "Tell him," I whispered to the night air. "I'm trying." For the first time in weeks, I breathed all the way in. The mission was over. But the healing? That was a new war entirely. 6 months later, Norfolk smelled like spring again. salt air, honeysuckle, jet fuel drifting from the docks. The world had moved on, but inside me, things felt strangely still, like my mind hadn't caught up with my new reality yet. Grief doesn't vanish with an arrest. Betrayal doesn't evaporate when the cuffs click. Some wounds don't bleed, they echo. The newspapers ran the story for 2 days. Defense contractor and consultant under investigation for unauthorized data transfers. No names, no mention of me. The Navy protects its own. Good. I didn't need a headline to validate anything. Silence sometimes is mercy. During those 6 months of leave labeled personal recovery, I did what I'd spent years avoiding. I learned how to sit still. And every morning, I found myself at my mother's house. Her porch always smelled like lemon polish and old stories. The wood creaked under my boots in the same familiar pattern it had when I was 14, then 18, then 27, heading to deployment with her hug still warm around my ribs. The night after the arrests, I'd shown up at her door, soaked through, eyes red, hands shaking. She didn't say a word. She opened the door, handed me a towel, and said, "Come in, sweetheart, you're home." Since then, she'd been my quiet anchor. Coffee ready before I woke, breakfast waiting without me asking. No judgment, no prodding, just presence. One morning, I found her kneeling in the garden, dirt smudged on her cheek, sunlight threading through her hair. "You're up early," she said as I walked out. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted, too quiet. She chuckled. "You always did sleep better when chaos was outside your window. Helicopters, storm winds, base alarms, those were lullabies to you. Maybe I don't know how to live without the noise." She brushed soil from her hands, then handed me a pair of gloves. "Then maybe it's time," she said, "to learn." We worked in companionable silence, pulling weeds, turning soil, letting the sun warm our shoulders. The peace felt strange at first, almost undeserved. When we finished, Mom stood, wiped her hands, and reached into her apron pocket. "This came for you last week," she said, "from the Department of Defense." I unfolded the letter. A commendation for integrity, cooperation in a classified operation, an invitation to speak at a resilience workshop for female officers. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. Mom smiled softly. "Looks like your country still needs you. Or maybe they just want the story," I muttered. She touched my arm gently. "Avery," she said, "sometimes telling the story is part of serving." That afternoon, someone knocked at the door. When I opened it, Evan Grant stood on the porch, the photographer who had handed me the flash drive that detonated everything. He looked nervous, hat in hand. "Hope this isn't a bad time, Commander." "You're lucky my mother doesn't own a shotgun," I said. He laughed awkwardly. "Point taken." He held out a brown envelope. "I found these. Thought maybe you'd want them." Inside were printed photos from my wedding I'd never seen. The moments everyone else enjoyed, while I was busy smiling through betrayal. But these were genuine. Me laughing with Mom, dancing with my nephew, shaking hands with old shipmates, sitting with childhood friends, sunlight catching my veil like spun gold. Not a single frame with David or Claire. Just me, whole, unbroken, before the truth cracked my life open. "I wanted you to remember," Evan said quietly, "that the day wasn't all lies." My eyes softened. "Thank you for showing me the truth, both kinds." He nodded. "If you ever need a friend or someone to take pictures of something new, I'm around." I didn't promise anything, but I didn't shut the door on it either. Later that week, I walked the shoreline as the sun sank behind the horizon. The tide whispered against the sand. Gulls dipped low over the water. The breeze tasted like salt and renewal. On a bench near the dunes sat an older veteran, a man with weathered skin and a faded USS Wisconsin cap. He glanced at the trident pin on my jacket and straightened. "You served?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Navy SEALs?" I nodded. He studied me for a moment, then said, "You fought for your country, ma'am. Now fight for your peace." A faint smile tugged at my lips. "Trying to." He chuckled. "Try less, live more." That night, Mom and I sat on her porch, listening to crickets buzz in the humid air. "Mom," I asked quietly, "you think I'll ever feel normal again?" She tilted her head. "Normal is overrated. Peace, though, that's worth chasing." I exhaled slowly. I used to think peace meant stillness. Now I think it means knowing the worst storm is behind you. "That's my girl," she whispered. Before bed, I opened my father's wooden box again. Inside, the trident gleamed softly. Next to it, I placed something new, a single pressed rose petal from my wedding bouquet. 2 symbols, duty and love, finally side by side. Not in conflict, not in pain, just coexistence. I'm learning, I whispered into the quiet, to live without armor. A year after everything unraveled, I put my uniform back on. Not for combat, not for deployment. For purpose. I accepted the position at the Norfolk Veterans Resilience Center, a place where soldiers learned how to fight the wars no manual prepared them for. Emotional readiness, crisis recovery, rebuilding after loss. The halls were lined with photos of soldiers from every branch. Their eyes held stories deeper than any battlefield. This was where I belonged. That morning, I stood before a small class of women in uniform, some barely out of basic, others carrying the invisible weight of too much experience. They expected tactics. They got truth. I once thought honor meant never bending, I began. I thought staying strong meant staying silent. But strength isn't silence. It's knowing when to lay down your armor. The room quieted. Sometimes, I continued, the people we trust most will break us. And sometimes they teach us, without meaning to, how to build ourselves back stronger. A young Marine raised her hand, dark circles under her eyes, jaw clenched. Ma'am, she asked, how do you forgive someone who doesn't deserve it? I held her gaze. You don't forgive for them, I said softly. You forgive so you can stop carrying them. She blinked hard, nodded. After class, as I stacked chairs, I noticed someone lingering at the doorway. Evan. He held a small envelope. Thought you might want this. Inside was a photo, me, months ago, standing on the shoreline at sunset, wind tugging at my hair, eyes steady on the horizon. You didn't know I took it, he said, but you looked peaceful. I thought maybe you'd want proof of that. I smiled. I do now. A week later, I drove to Arlington Cemetery. I walked between the rows of white markers until I reached my father's grave. The grass was freshly cut. A small flag fluttered beside his stone. I stood there a long time. Hey, Dad, I whispered. I finished the mission. A breeze swept over the hill, brushing my hair back. But not the one they gave me, I continued. The one life gave me, to learn that honor isn't revenge. It's telling the truth and walking away with your integrity intact. I set his trident on the stone. Beside it, a small card with a sketch of my wrist tattoo. A rose with infinity thorns. Strength and continuity. Beauty and survival. You were right, I whispered. Courage and forgiveness. They're the same language, just spoken at different times. As dusk settled, I walked down to the memorial dock. The river shimmered under the glow of bridge lights. A year ago, I had thrown my wedding ring into the bay. Tonight, I threw something else. My last apology to a man who never deserved it. The water accepted it quietly. The next week, at the Resilience Center, I hung a new plaque outside my classroom. Honor isn't in the battle, it's in what you do after it's over. Below it, I placed the shoreline photo Evan had given me. The caption, she learned to stand again. That night, back on my porch, I poured 2 cups of tea, one for me, one in memory. As I lifted mine, Mom called. Can't sleep, she asked. Never could before big missions, I said. She chuckled. And what's tomorrow's mission? To remind people that forgiveness isn't weakness, I said. It's how we rebuild. There was a pause, then her voice softened. Your father would be proud, Avery. I am too. I swallowed gently. Thanks, Mom. I'm finally proud of me too. I leaned back, watching the stars flicker across the dark horizon. For the first time in a long time, my chest didn't ache. Peace didn't arrive like a sunrise. It arrived like a tide, quiet, patient, persistent. If you're reading this at a moment when forgiveness feels impossible, take a breath. You don't have to forget the hurt. Just stop carrying it alone. And if you've rebuilt yourself after loss, if you've survived betrayal and found strength again, tell your story below. Someone out there needs your truth.